Redditors, are there people that were in your wedding party you don't speak to anymore? If so, why? Story 1. We've lost touch with one groomsman just because he moved to another state and didn't answer messages. Much more dramatic. I have a friend who is Arab American. He got married September 29th, 2023, and his best man was a Jewish friend whom he'd grown up with his whole life. A week later, Hamas and Israel went to war, and they got in an argument over which side was committing genocide against whom. And now they don't speak. Story 2. Our best friends, married at the time. He was my best man. She was a bridesmaid for my wife. Shortly after, he cheated and divorced his wife. Neither of them will talk to my wife or me anymore. Very strange. Story 3. My sister-in-law then announced she had to take a week off with the stress of it all when I went ahead and ordered cakes at very short notice as I couldn't stand the drama and told her not to worry. She threw the mother of tantrums, then tried to dictate the color and type of shoes the flower girl should have. My mill insisted she was paying for the shoes, and so we were going to have to suck it up, except the 3-year-old flower girl had her own ideas. I had to tell MIL. If Sil didn't let me know if she was attending the wedding by a specific date, I'd take that as she would not attend and cancel her flowers and let the officiants know there was only one reading. My friends tried to tell me that maybe she was feeling left out. The only way the crazy bad person could have been any more involved is if she had been dressed in a meringue and veil and standing up front with my then-fiancé, her brother. Crazy bad person then behaves like we're all best friends, and she hasn't behaved like a psychotic, destructive witch. I don't care if she recognizes herself on this either. We got married around COVID as well, so she managed to make a really stressful time utterly hellish for me. I have loathed her ever since. Story 4. Yep, it was 25 years ago, so it's not that uncommon. They wouldn't grow up and take responsibility for poor behavior, so after being best friends for 23 years, had to let them go. Story 5. I have a relationship with only one of my bridesmaids. 2 got into new age stuff and went off the deep end. The other was too much of a narcissist. The losses hurt sometimes still, but I don't see any other way it would have worked out. Story 6. My 53 feet Bill, 49 meters, fantasy football. It was near the end of the season 2 years ago and the guy on the Bills collapsed. He was projected to win, but was losing when they called the game. He lost. As commissioner, I decided to just have all 4 teams advance. He was projected to win. Perfect. He lost. Then he lost his cow. We haven't spoken since January 23rd. Story 7. My brother was my best man, but he passed away. A little hard to talk to now. Ujia is not in my wheelhouse. My future ex-wife's brother was a friend from way back who married the future ex-wife's best friend, and they dropped me after the divorce. My childhood friend is still a good friend, so I have one. Story 8. They are Trump supporters now and said the ends justified the means when Trump added to the Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade was overturned. They even call themselves Christians. What a load of cow. Story 9. I actually don't speak to any of them. 2012, I got married. I live in Texas and grew up in the church, so that's where all my friends were from. They were all very conservative politically, but we didn't really talk politics that much. I was often the odd one out when conversations did go that way, but we had quite a few great discussions over the years. It wasn't ever a problem. We had all been friends since high school or earlier, and it was just a complete non-issue. 2015, Trump won the primary, and they all went from laughing about how terrible Trump would be to supporting him in a matter of a couple weeks. Over the course of the next couple years, they all went from generally not being super engaged politically to talking about politics almost exclusively. It got really annoying, but we still to the sky out. 2020 COVID shuts everything down. They all still got together in person constant, but I was actually treating the pandemic like it was real, and I had a newborn to worry about. I made an effort to hang out with them on Discord and Steam a couple times, but I already couldn't remember the last time a conversation wasn't dominated by politics. So a week went by without hanging out, then another, and before I knew it, I hadn't spoken to any of them in over a year. None of them ever reached out. Even the couple Discord gaming sessions were initiated by me. But in the end, I decided it was time to move on and accepted that they just weren't part of my life. I'd already been part of a weekly D&D game with some more recent friends for more than a year before the pandemic, and we kept it going online every week. So it's not a situation where we refuse to speak or anything. If they called out, texted me today, I'd gladly have a chat with any of them. But it's also not worth reaching out and trying to pick those relationships back up. I've moved on. I assume they have too. Our paths diverged, and that's okay. Story 10. For me, no, it was a small wedding of my best friend and my family. My now ex-husband had friends and some family, and he no longer speaks to his friends. No huge blow-up, no explosive drama, but people change. He'd had most of these friends since childhood or high school, and sometimes you just grow up and grow into different people. Story 11. They don't respond with thank yous when gifts are purchased. Don't initiate contact. Can't be bothered to make time to see us if we are traveling thousands of miles. All around apathetic about our existence. Story 12. I've been married 31 years, 32 in April, and I'm still best friends with 2 of my bridesmaids. The other I haven't had a falling out with. We just don't stay in touch much because she's not on social media. Story 13. Some of these stories are crazy. My entire wedding party was family or friends so close they're practically family. We're approaching our 10th anniversary and they'd all still be in the same spots. Story 14. My ex-husband, maid of honor, sister, got divorced, grown apart, changed jobs, etc. The sis off. No need to keep in contact with her. Story 15. My stepmother-in-law went off the deep end, full-blown paranoid schizophrenic who refused to get help, threatening to burn the house down, cameras in the TVs, etc. She lost everything in her life and is now divorced from my father-in-law. She still sends rambling, nonsensical texts every once in a while. Story 16. My entire side of my family, brothers, sisters, mom, and SD, they were always toxic, and to be honest, the wedding was just a full stop on a sentence long written. Knowing that they were saying and doing the most awful things behind our backs while smiling for the cameras hurts the most. We've basically never looked at our wedding pics. Story 17. I'm divorced now, but my sister's date went to prison for murdering someone and burning the body in her car in the woods. We had stopped talking long before that, but he's in our wedding pictures. Story 18. College roommate. I got into business with his father. He didn't like the success I had working with his father. He got in the way of business. Nepotism took over and ruined my business dealings. I left and we had a falling out. Honestly, no regrets. Story 19. My brother. He was the best man. We were best friends and he was one of the few people I really looked up to and admired. About 7 years ago, him and his wife, also in my wife's bridal party, started getting into this really extreme version of Christianity. Around the same time, I was deconstructing my religion and trying to figure what I actually believed. My brother and his wife were initially super supportive with all my questioning until they realized that I wasn't coming back to the flock. He slowly started pulling away and blocking me on social media. I called him and told him I didn't want this to ruin our relationship and asked him if we could just leave religion out of our conversations. He agreed, and things were fine for about a month. Then he just ghosted me. He moved his entire family, 12 kids total, 6 biological and 6 adopted, to another state under the cover of night. Turns out my brother is a real piece of human cow. He has screwed over a ton of people to get money. I always thought he was a pillar of his community. So did everyone else, though, until the stories started coming out. There's also questionable close relationship stuff he did to his wife and possibly some of the kids. CPS has been called several times and they always conclude that everything is fine. Story 20. One of my bridesmaids got pour out the water drunk and decided to throw herself at my new husband. My husband noped the fudge out of that situation as quickly as humanly possible, and I haven't spoken to her since. Story 21. Most of my father's side of my family. They are all drunk, Trump-loving assholes. I knew even before then that once my father passed away that I'd probably never talk to them again. My father was an alcoholic as well, as am I, but he was in recovery most of my memory. Relapsed about 10 years before he passed, and then stopped again when he was diagnosed with lung cancer. But neither of us were assholes whether we drank or not. When he did pass, they all wanted to sue someone and got mad at me when I reminded them that he started smoking at 11 years old, 3 packs a day for much of it, and lived for another 50+ years. Edit. Just realized I missed the word party, so this didn't really answer the question. I only had my brother, her brother, and my best friend. Don't talk to my best friend a ton anymore, but we still touch base every so often. And due to kids' family, I see the other 2 often. Story 22. One was my sister's ex-husband. He cheated on her multiple times and scammed her out of a lot of money. They had a nasty divorce that candy out over years, and he's still dragging her into drama whenever he can. The other was my best friend from childhood, who I recently discovered has been emotionally and physically abusive with every girl he's dated over the last decade. The last girl he beat and choked until she passed out. Luckily, she woke up and is okay, and he got to enjoy felony charges and some jail time. People are crazy, and it still blows my mind that I know anyone who would act like that. Story 23. Maid of honor has found herself wrangled into ideological beliefs that trans kids are confused and tainted by Satan. Me being trans NB and partner being genderqueer, yeah, not a conversation we want to seek out. TW. Abuse bridesmaid. A and groomsman. W. Married couple. We don't talk to anymore either. We were best man and maid of honor at their wedding less than a year later. 2 years later, around the beginning of COVID, We all ended up moving in together. We were really close, but the divide was already beginning. We had to listen to and then intervene with 5 or 6 huge drunken blowout fights, where he was practically holding her hostage in their room. Would stand in the doorway, demanding that she continued to talk with him when she just needed to get away and blow off steam. We intervened, and she was able to get away with my partner and cool off, while I sat and talked with him about how messed up that behavior was. One day, we were in the city, a half hour away, and got a call from her. All we could hear was her screaming, asking him to let her leave. He's flipping wasted, telling her she can't leave, that she has to stay and talk with him. That she's stupid and selfish for wanting to walk away to cool off. That no one was home to help her. We just had to listen as our friend was verbally assaulted and physically blocked from leaving. We rushed home and she had already escaped through a window, and he had holed himself up in their room. We waited for 2 hours for him to come out so we could talk, but he likely just stayed in his room finishing that day's half-gallon of McMaster's whiskey. You had been reclusive for a few months by then, probably ashamed of himself, but not ashamed enough to stop drinking or stop the behavior. A had gotten to the point where she didn't want to talk to us about it anymore. I get it. It's your life, your messed up marriage, and she came from a family that doesn't call cops and likes to deal with things internally. A few weeks later, my partner and I were working on our brakes out in the driveway. A rushes out of the house, flustered, with W yelling from the door that she needed to come back right now. We were right there. I just needed to walk away, so she did just that. We asked if she was okay. She kind of shrugged us off and said she was fine. Continued to walk down the road, in the direction of her family's house. 5 minutes later, W walks out. Big cow eating grin on his face like everything was just gravy, nothing to see here. I yell at him and tell him that she needs to just cool off, let her walk away. I tell him, if you go after her, I'm calling the cops. You proceeds to lose his cow, telling us to fudge off, saying maybe we should just move out, telling us to mind our own flipping business, as if this hadn't become our flipping business. He doesn't listen and follows her down the road. 10 minutes go by. I'm too in shock to actually call the cops. Believe me, I wish I had. And they walk back together, her head down, his head held high like the winner of prize day. We just sit there in shock still, cannot believe this is happening. A was like the strongest woman we knew, and to see her belittled so often that this absolute could control her was devastating. We tried to stay for a month or so after that final incident, to try and be there for A, but W and his persistence and his manipulation tactics won out. We had been thinking about moving because we couldn't handle it anymore, and when we brought it up to A, she asked if we could be out by the end of the month, 3 weeks from that day. We were gutted. We had tried to be there to help her through, and he had poisoned her to us completely. My partner pretty much immediately went no contact. I tried to touch base with A few times to make sure she was doing okay, and eventually had to give up when we found that they were trying for a baby. And I quote, maybe it will fix him. They now have the little boy she always wanted. I look at their Facebook pages once every few months out of sadness and nostalgia for the good days. I honestly don't know what's wrong with me. I should flipping hate W, and part of me does, but part of me wishes for an alternate universe where this never happened. Last I heard, he was still drinking heavily, and when asked by another mutual friend about his drinking, A replied with something to the tune of, I wish people would leave our business alone. They will keep enabling each other to the point where all of their bridges are burnt, and they will be left standing on a desolate island wondering what went wrong. To this day, my world and my heart is shattered over this loss. Sorry for the book, I apparently had to get a lot off my chest. I'm on mobile, apologize for the formatting, and if the thoughts seem incoherent, reliving this was cathartic and reminded me exactly why I need to move on with my life and get over that fantasy of the alternate universe. Story 20. I don't speak to them all the time, but I've caught up with each of them from time to time as we have drifted apart over the last 11 years. Story 25. My best man. I don't think he ever truly adjusted to me moving away from the single low-wage job life into a married career life. He would get upset that I wouldn't go hang out on a weeknight or that I wasn't able to text him back while at work. We tried to incorporate him into some of the new hobbies we found with mutual friends, but sort of found out he was just not fun to be around. He would get really drunk and be obnoxious and ruin the night for everyone, and so we grew apart more and more. I don't hate the guy, but I just have no desire to hang out with him any, as his friendship was just a drain on the limited energy I have to give. Story 26. My best man. We were like brothers from 6th grade to our 20s. So much so that 20 years later, people from school still associated us together. Literally saw him twice. After my wedding, he told me he got a job cooking on an oil rig in Louisiana. He had always wanted to be a chef, so it seemed plausible. Turns out he moved to Mississippi because his high school girlfriend was down there. She hated me for reasons unknown to me. They got married and had 2 kids after they moved back home. He passed away a few years ago from cancer. All our other friend group stayed in contact. Asked me if I was going to the funeral, but he passed away years ago to me. No point in going since all it would do would cause tension with his grieving widow. Although our other best friend said he cleared it with her, and I didn't want that on me when she was already going through possibly the worst time of her life. I had already made peace with the fact that he was no longer in my life. I get you choose love over friends if it comes down to it, but it would have been nice for him to just be honest instead of ghosting me. Story 27. Yes, one became a fascist who blamed women and people of color for his lack of success, and I personally thought it had more to do with his goal of becoming a professional Roblox player. BTW, he is 50 years old, and refusing to get a full-time job because it interfered with his plans. And I am still unaware of that as even a real thing, making a living playing, not streaming, Roblox. I know there are professional video game players, but Story 28. There was someone in the wedding party who we didn't talk to on the day of the wedding. In hindsight, we should have given them the boot and not even let them participate. Story 29. In the groom's side, my husband's best man. He was a good college friend and roommate. But once university ended, he didn't keep contact with us. And we've tried reaching out on and off throughout the years. I'm sad about the loss of friendship on my husband's behalf. Story 30. 33 years ago, my wife's bridesmaid were her cousin, her sister-in-law, and her other brother's fiancé. One, cousin, haven't spoken for years. She's kind of turned into a big Trumpanzee, no skin off my nose. Her extended family are seriously weird people. Dusra, sister, she's awesome. Moonram, sister-in-law, always has been a shrew. Nobody in the family likes her because she always has her nose out of joint over trivial stuff. Is always throwing a tantrum because she is the only important person in the room. 4. Fiancé, broke it off with my bill. I knew that was going to happen because she made a pass at my brother at our engagement party, then my cousin, in front of my BIL's parents. Passed away a couple of years ago from cancer, never married. On my side, best friend, my 2 brothers, and brother-in-law. First, best friend, had dinner with him and his wife. My wife has become good friends with his wife, second brothers. One lives in town, see him all the time. Other brother lives in North Carolina, see him a couple of times a year, talk to him every 2 weeks. Moondram. Brother-in-law. My sister went completely round the bend 20 years ago and started banging any guy she could. And that's a shame, because my Bill was a prince of a guy. Lawyer, who made great money and did nothing but loved his kids. After she divorced him, he kind of had 3 tough years, met someone awesome, and has been happily married ever since. My sister, one idiotic decision after another. Barely making ends meet right now at age 65. Story 31. One of my groomsmen unfortunately terminated himself about a year ago. Prior to that, though, he was in a rough patch and basically everyone out of his life and moved to a new state. It had been about 2 years prior since I had last spoke with him, though. Story 32. My parents. One wanted nothing to do, nothing with me after they divorced. The other lies as easily as breathes. Story 33. We were friends for decades after the wedding, too. But she went full MAGA in 2016. She celebrated Dobbs, while I said reducing our daughters to the status of incubators was a bad thing. She went to Trump fundraisers. I donated to campaigns in key states. I'll never forgive her for what she did to her own daughter. She lives in Idaho. Idaho has lost over 20% of their obstetricians since Dobbs. Story 34. Meh, she lost her cow, I guess. She legit decided she hated me out of nowhere after several years of being very close. We went from planning her wedding to my husband's best friend, as we eagerly anticipated his proposal, to her deciding that not only would I no longer be in her wedding party, but would not be invited to their wedding, as in my husband was in the groom's wedding party, and the invitation was sent to us, a married couple. They had both been in our wedding party, addressed only to him. He sought clarity. It was confirmed that only he was invited. Of course he felt torn between a best friend and wife. I told him he could go BC. I knew how much he loved his friend, but he ended up deciding he couldn't just let that slide, so he declined. They guys stayed friends. We've crossed paths a couple times since at mutual friends' weddings. The first time I was like, seriously happened was? And she said something like, ha ha ha, I have no idea, I just started hating you. Glad we're past it now, and tried to go right back to acting like how we had when we'd been close. So weird. Still don't know why it happened. I'm civil with her now, but don't trust her as far as I could throw her. Story 35. I was 18, this was 2000. Best man I recently started speaking to again after some confusion and life path differentiation in college. He's awesome, and we basically just became new old best friends instantly after over 20 years. One groomsman, that was another longtime friend from childhood, but in a different way. He was homeschooled, but our families knew each other through religion. Passed away a few years ago from alcoholism. We hadn't really spoken many years because, again, life paths were different. The rest were guys from my fraternity at the time, and I'm loosely connected to one of them through social media, but that's about it. It was not what you'd picture from a fraternity. We had MTG tournaments and hosted LAN parties, and also did hunting excursions. Not exactly Animal House. The funny thing is, the guy I really wanted to be there couldn't make it because of an FFA convention that was crazy important to him at the time. He was 17. No hard feelings. We talk daily, and even though we live 700 miles apart, we make it a point to see each other about twice every year. Story 36. Our wedding was small, and our party consisted of a best man and maid of honor. But there were lots of breakups. My best man got dumped, the maid of honor divorced her husband, and then within the last few years, 2 more couples broke up. One of those women is now dating the best man, the other man is now dating the maid of honor. But there have been a few marriages from couples in attendance too. Most of us are still friends, but there's a few who none of us talk to based on how they handled the divorce breakup. Story 37. Yes, but not for any nefarious reasons. We simply drifted apart and our lives took us in different directions. The one guy in particular kind of just vanished from our friend group without a word one day. And when he resurfaced online years later, he'd moved and married a woman with like 5 kids. So didn't really have time for us anymore. Story 38. My groomsmen, except for my brother, were college classmates. I thought we would end up being lifelong friends, but I ended up dropping out. They were not very supportive, and I was embarrassed over my failure. My wife encouraged me to get back into school. After graduation, we moved 500 miles away for a job, made our home there, raised our children, had a fair measure of success. And other than my brother and one other person, I never talked to or saw any of them again.